Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome you all to the July 2025 session of Community Health Learning Collective, also known as CHLC. So my name is Maureen Burns, and I'm a community health worker with the HAP Foundation in Chicago, Illinois. I'm joined by my colleague, Candace Straw. The two of us facilitate this group. Whether you are a returning member or new to this group, we want to let you know that we're happy that you're here and that you've decided to share space with us. This group is a once monthly Zoom group that is focused primarily on community health workers, promotoras de salud, CHRs, and other folks with similar job titles. We also welcome our allies, so people who may not identify as community health workers, but who support the work that we do, as well as just interested members of the community. So that's a little bit about the group. For this month, we're really excited to be able to welcome Joe Bullock of Man Up to Cancer. Man Up to Cancer is a leading support community for men impacted by cancer in North America. So they offer peer-to-peer support, an annual retreat, a chemo backpack program, and they have more than 40 local chapters that are all geared towards improving the quality of life for their members. Joe is a founding board member of Man Up to Cancer and an original leadership team member, as well as a survivor of colorectal cancer. So we're really excited to welcome Joe. And I think that this topic is very important, especially for us as community health workers. We know that the CHW profession tends to lean significantly female. The majority of our workforce identifies as being women. But it's very important that we not forget the distinct healthcare needs of men and how much peer support can be beneficial, men supporting other men with cancer. And so I think Joe is a great example of someone really using his own lived experiences with cancer to help and support others. So thank you for being here, Joe, and I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. So appreciative for the opportunity to share about Man Up to Cancer and my own journey with cancer. Um, I was just in Chicago actually last month at the ASCO convention at McCormick Place, and I got to go to a Cubs game, my first Cubs game I'd ever been to there. So that was exciting to be able to do there. It's my third time in Chicago, so I really enjoyed my time there. Always do in the area. So a little bit about myself, really my life before cancer, because I think the important thing is that we try to stress with our men is that your identity isn't your disease, right? You're a whole person. And so before cancer, I was a stay-at-home dad. I live in Durham, North Carolina. And if you notice, obviously I'm from the South because of my accent. It's very true. When all this stuff came out with White Lotus earlier this year, and people were talking about how we enunciate words or pronounce them, and I didn't think I did, but then I started saying things like colonoscopy and oxyplatin and Zanola, and I did draw those terms out, and I thought I really do talk that way. So that's kind of funny, the reality of it. But definitely, I'm from the South. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Michelle, who has been a nurse. She's a healthcare worker for 32 years at Duke Hospital. It was interesting for many years. I would go visit her just to have lunch and be on the other side of it, not a patient. So becoming that reality, and I'll share later that she found that I was probably her worst patient she ever had. In fact, she's disclaimed that a couple of times during our whole ordeal. But uh, so to share a little bit, so like I said, married for 32 years to my wife here in Durham, North Carolina. We live with our two adult children. Just both of them are just finished college, so They're still living at home as they're working. We actually rescued three pit bulls. We have three pitties that we take care of now. We treat them like our grandchildren. So you might hear one bark here shortly, every once in a while. Um, and then basically for the first 20 years of our marriage or so, I became a stay-at-home dad. Um, when my wife and I got married, she was working as a nurse. I had a career in hotel restaurant management. I was doing a lot of corporate catering. We realized one day that all of my salary was going to daycare because we had two kids in daycare at the time. So the option was for me to come home and be a stay-at-home dad. I worked part-time as a pre-K teacher. I Cancer had only entered my life once in my 20s when I had a scare with testicular cancer. Luckily, that wasn't cancer then. It was just a simple surgery, and I was done with that. Um, but it wasn't until 2015, we had gone on with our lives, had our children. And in 2015, I found out, unbeknownst to my dad, who had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Um, and it was because I had gone to see a doctor who was had to be my doctor at the time, my new doctor, and he noticed that on my family history, I didn't have prostate cancer. And he kind of went in a roundabout way to say that you may want to ask your dad about that. So found out that my dad had prostate cancer. And he lived across the street from me. And so I became his caregiver. Um, Starting shortly after that, after finding out he was diagnosed, he was very reluctant to want to be cared for. But my mom was like, I really need you to help support your dad through this. So that's kind of where my journey with cancer began as a caregiver. He passed in 2017 from prostate cancer. And I was the type of guy who, over the years, I was pretty good about going to getting routine physicals. But during those 3 years, honestly, when I was caring for someone, basically I would go to work and come home and care for my dad. That's what we do as caregivers, right? And at some point I was kind of putting off my own health care. I hadn't been to the doctor in a couple of years. I was kind of having some symptoms of colorectal. My wife, who's a nurse, was saying, kept saying, you need to go to the doctor. You should get this checked. I was starting to have like blood on my stool and just irregular bowel movement, just all the typical colorectal cancer signs were happening. And I just kept putting it off because dad needed help and I was taking care of dad. So after he passed in 2017, and in all of this, now I did go to the doctor a couple of times, and I was told basically that I was too young for colorectal cancer. I was only 47 at the time. Um, we had talked about changing diets and different things, but never sent to get a colonoscopy. And at the time, the screening for colorectal was age 50 back then, so it just wasn't alerted to get the screening. Um, so finally, at age 50, my doctor sent me in for a colonoscopy. And I walked out of that treatment, a cancer patient. I found out that day that they had found a 10 centimeter tumor in the sigmoid region of my colon. And I had surgery performed to remove that tumor. It was found to be cancerous. Um, they did find like two other precancerous polyps, and those were three other precancer polyps were removed during the colonoscopy. During the surgery, they found that there was 4 lymph nodes out of 40 removed on the tract where the tumor was. That's about 12 inches of my colon. That 4 of those lymph nodes were positive for cancer. So that ended up me doing 6 months of chemotherapy of what they called Capox, which was oxaliplatin and Zanola. I did those 6 months. And then After treatment was done, it was about 8 months of treatment, found out that I was no evidence of disease. Now a lot of people say the hardest part of being diagnosed with cancer is going through the treatment. And yes, that was hard. But I think the most difficult part for me, especially as a man, was going through the depression that it brought. I was not someone who struggled with my mental health. As I said earlier, I was a pre-K teacher for many years, so I was always kind of a happy-go-lucky guy. I was a dad, took care of my children, did everything that a father does with my kids. My daughter was in her second year of college when I was diagnosed. My son was starting high school, so just a very involved dad. Um, um, Band parent, marching band parent, all the things that go with that. So to be diagnosed with cancer is itself a shock. I was very shocked. And I think I went through this period of just being a very good patient because obviously my wife was a nurse. So it was really like I say cancer was like showing up for my wedding. It was like I was just told where to stand, where to sit, what to do. And I was just almost like robotic. Like we talk about I mentioned cowboy culture and just really just kind of going through the process, you know, learning myself what I was going through, what I was going to have to deal with, and luckily, but they were able to do a resection during my surgery, and so I didn't have to have an ostomy. Um, no, there was no bag involved, so I kind of consider myself lucky in that sense. And then as I started going through treatment, it wasn't too bad for me. Like I was kind of like I'm okay. People would come to me and say, "How do you feel? What are you thinking? What do you need?" And obviously I had mentioned I was a pre-K teacher, so I had to like open up to like 120. We had a school of 120 children and their parents. So all of a sudden, I became the cancer patient in this. So I got a lot of like, how are you doing? How can we help? What can we do? And I was just like, I'm okay. I'm doing good. Um, and it wasn't until probably 3 months, I would say. So I was diagnosed in May of 2018, went through surgery in June, recovery. I started chemo August of 2018. It wasn't until probably the second round of chemo that all the side effects that you hear about, the neuropathy, some of the pain in my legs and intense. I couldn't drink anything cold for like 10 days. I used to have this test with my son. We would go to Wendy's on Saturdays for lunch. Frosty test. I was tested as frosty, and I was like, nope, can't have that yet. It was usually about 10 days after treatment that I could actually have. Because with K-pox, you do 3 weeks, you do a 3 hour infusion at your cancer center, and then you do 2 weeks of the Zanola pills. And then you have a week off. So when I had my week off, usually I would at some point could you have something cold or whatever, or right before. And that was kind of our test. My son would be like, "I'll get the frosty, and you can test it and see if you can have some," kind of thing. It was just something between us. Because with your kids, I step back to talk about them a little bit because my daughter was um, 17, 18 at the time. Um, and she was going through her second year of college. And for her, when she heard I had cancer, she went, like all teenagers do, straight to Google. And she had come downstairs crying, like, "Dad, you're dying." She knew everything just hit her, like, within. We had to sit down with her and reassure her everything was okay, what my doctors were saying, what the plan was, that I was not, if I didn't say I was stage 3. So told her what that meant and she was okay with it. She still had questions, and then we would she was the one that would have all the questions. My son, who was 11 at the time, was more trusting. He was very easygoing. He was like, "Yeah, okay, you're okay. Yeah, everything's okay." And he didn't ask a whole lot of questions, just every once in a while when I was going to treatment or coming home from treatment. So as far as just telling your kids, you kind of just have to reassure them, I think, through the whole process that you're going to be okay or what you're going through, and just allow them to come to you with questions, at times, in that process. So going back to so really the side effects of chemo didn't hit me till probably the second run. And so I had gone to my oncologist's office that morning and I walked in and sat down and he walked in the room and he looked at me and he just saw that I was very withdrawn. It looked like I'd lost a lot of weight. Um, he just when he walked in the room, he had his files with all the information about because I had gone in and done all the testing and scanning and everything that morning to see if I could do chemo. And he just sat his paperwork down and he said, "We're not even going to talk about it." I tear up thinking about this still. We're not even going to talk about cancer right now because we need to talk about you because you don't look good. Like it was just you don't. And my wife was with me and she was like nodding her head because I think she'd been through with me at that point. And I thought we were okay. Like I thought I was handling things well. And he was like, I think we need to talk about how you're doing. At that point, he was treating the whole patient and just not my cancer. So I was very lucky to have an oncologist. I had at Duke Cancer Center in Durham. And so it just happened to be that day that there was a therapist on the floor. Because they have a whole nonprofit side that specializes in caring for cancer patients who with mental health issues or helping them deal with the mental health issues that come with cancer. And so he said, "Can she just come in the room and sit with you? You don't have to say anything. You don't have to talk. She can just run through all the programs with you, and you can nod your head, you can talk, you can share." And it ended up that day, it took about 10 minutes into it, and I kind of regurgitated everything that day. All my feelings, my loss of, I felt like I had lost my identity as a father. I felt like people at work were just kind of walking on eggshells around me. I didn't feel, I had a great support system. I had a loving wife. I had great friendships. I had all the things to support my journey, but yet I didn't feel supported and I didn't feel like I could truly talk about what I was going through because people were having a hard time hearing it. I could hear my friends kind of avoiding the conversation because they were worried that they might get diagnosed with cancer. Like it was just, you could tell there was a wall definitely there. Um, so we found out after talking with the therapist that day, and my wife and I met with her a couple of rounds and talked my wife through some things, and then I stayed with her with the therapist probably because we realized honestly what I really needed. We talked about drug protocols and things for anxiety, and we both felt like talking through it that I didn't really need that. What I needed was talk therapy. I just needed a place to talk about these things, which was very helpful. And there's definitely, you definitely talk to your therapist, psychologist. I think it's very important that cancer patients do that who struggle with anxiety because a lot of this stuff is new to a lot of patients. They don't know how to handle it. And there's definitely protocols if you need it there that can help you. But we found that all I needed was talk therapy. So she would actually come to my treatments. I would go for treatment every 3 weeks. And she would just come in during my treatment periods and we'd sit and talk for 30 minutes since I was there and just talk about life and how I was doing and what was hurting and not and what I felt good about, what I didn't feel good about. Um, and we found that that was to me the biggest help through my journey was really hitting that depression head on, and it really helped with my because we know studies show that especially for men, a lot of times it. One thing we talk about on our website is how it can affect their medical outcomes. I've known men who won't go to treatment because they're so depressed about it or they're so worried about it or they don't they won't pursue treatment protocols, they won't talk about marriages that will break up because they just won't open up, the couples won't talk about it. um and so it was great experience to develop that, but in that, so when I became Ned, no evidence of disease. This is now February 2019 when I did my scan after treatment and they found all the cancer had been removed. And I actually had stopped going to therapy. I was still going to a local, and one thing I did do, and I know now that things are starting to open up again. I know during COVID, a lot of stuff went virtual, but I am seeing that there are more cancer centers that are starting to do in-person support groups. And so I did go to an in-person support group, and I continued to go to it for a couple of years. Um, More so the fact that my therapist was leading the group and she thought I could bring hope to the group and I should come be a part of it and continue to stick with it. And I did. I did for at least a year or so, um, a part of the group. But I remember finishing up treatment, and my therapist was like, "You seem to be doing really well right now." Um, I wouldn't be going to treatment anymore, so she wouldn't come see me in treatment. But she was like, "You're going to need to call me in a couple of months because you're going to hit a wall." And I didn't know what she was talking about at the time. And she said, and sure enough, about 2 months after becoming no evidence of disease, I hit this wall of depression where I was going back worrying about reoccurrences, worrying about what everybody thought about me, worrying about all these things people were kind of asking me again. So I ended up going back into therapy for 2 or 3 months and doing some talk therapy with her to talk things through as well. So I think just really having a better understanding in all of this, how important your mental health is when you go through treatment. And I don't think it's talked about enough, especially amongst men. Men tend to be like the whole cowboy idea, rub some dirt on it, we're fine. And part of it too is that men, and I don't say this in the right way, but it for many families, it's such a turnaround because maybe the husband was the main caregiver, the main provider, and for a lot of these families, that whole idea changes, and the spouse or partner becomes a person that's bringing in the income while the other person is trying to survive cancer. And that's a total different thing. Maybe that person doesn't bring in as much money into the family, or you're having to look for other ways of income. And it puts a lot of pressure on the family dynamic and a lot of pressure on the patient and what they are now dealing with and how their identity totally switches and they're not expecting it. And they don't know how to ask for help to get through that. And so luckily, like I said, I had a wife who kind of kicked me into therapy. She was like, please take him away. He needs to talk through this. She was like, there's just no way. She would have never left me. Like she would have never done that. But I think she was like, if you don't go do this, this is going to make this journey a lot harder for both of us. So it was really that I learned very quickly what she needed. And really, I always think that, there is the idea of putting the care back into the caregiver. As patients, I think we need to find ways to do that in our journeys. And I think that was the one way she needed me to do was to go find another place to have a sounding board was very important. So I last year I my oncologist said I graduated, right? So he released me and back to my general practitioner. I do continue to get screenings. I actually have a colonoscopy scheduled for November, so I do keep up with my health screenings as I should, and continue on my journey. I didn't, and as far as man up to cancer, in this entire journey, I went through this period going back after becoming no evidence of disease, where it's almost like I can't describe it other than there's like a mourning of the cancer. Like I missed being in treatment. Would miss going to the cancer center, seeing the nurses, seeing my oncologist. It was weird. Um, and then I kind of went through this period where I didn't want to talk about it again at all for a few months. I kind of just didn't want to. I wanted to get past it. Um, it's different. They talk about different phases of grief, and there's different phases of when you move on from your cancer, and it's hard to describe. Um, but then probably in late 2019, I started thinking about my journey. A close friend of mine had passed away from stage 4 colon cancer. He and I had many, many talks, and one of the talks he had said to me was, when you feel up to it, when you're ready, I think you need to make sure you're getting more men to talk about their cancer. So when he passed away, his name was Charles Griffin Jr. He was diagnosed at 32. He a black man. He played football for the Baltimore Ravens a few years ago. Um, he was diagnosed at 32, passed away at 34. And he and I had several conversations. And one of his last conversations to me was, when you're up to it, I think you start sharing more with men about their cancer and getting them to talk about it. So I tried a couple of times to make that happen. I started working with a couple of organizations. One was sending out care packages to cancer patients. Another one was sending out cards to cancer patients. But I really wanted to do something bigger, but I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't a tech guy. I didn't understand how to website. I don't know what all that entailed. Um, but I really believe that the universe brings people together for a reason. So I happened to be in another Facebook group, another organization that's called colontown.org that specializes in peer-to-peer support for colorectal cancer patients. And I met a gentleman in there. His name is Trevor Maxwell. Trevor is currently battling stage 4 colorectal. He was diagnosed at 41. He's been battling it for 7 years. He just turned 48 this past year, and his second daughter just graduated from high school. So he never thought he'd be around to see this child graduate from high school. So he was part of that 15%, right, of survival rate for stage 4 colorectal. Um, so he and I met through the group. He had mentioned something in a post about men and mental health. And I remember responding to it and saying, hey, I feel the same way. I think there's a lack of discussion about mental health and not talking about your feelings, your emotions. Men typically don't do this. They tend to want to just kind of hold on to their emotions and not really deal with what they're going through. And so he had mentioned to me offline that he was creating something called Man Up to Cancer, creating a website, and he wanted to create a Facebook group. And over the probably 18 months since being diagnosed, I had been having these side conversations with a lot of men who were going through cancer. I would really through social media, and then I would just send private messages and just say, hey, how are you doing? This is what I'm going through. What are you going through? How are you handling cancer as a father, as a husband? How's your treatment going? So we were having these side conversations. And so when Trevor mentioned wanting to start a Facebook group, I said, well, I probably have about 500 men at the time that I'm constantly like talking with. So I was thinking about trying to create something. So Trevor and I we'll start out as a Facebook group called The Howling Place. Um, and we had about 300 men join that Facebook group over within a month. And it slowly grew over 5 years to about 3,200 members, all forms of colorectal. Um, we probably have about 60% colorectal. There's probably like 25% prostate, and then we've got quite a few blood cancer, minimal blood cancers, testicular, several. We probably represent about 30 types of cancer in the group. And so we went studying along about 3 years ago, well, 2 years ago, we actually formed a nonprofit called manuptocancer.org. We started some programs. I know we mentioned earlier about our chemo care backpack program. So another new thing for us this year is we actually started our own platform. So when you go to our website, manuptocancer.org, you can, if you're a man going through cancer, you can register to become a member. And the only thing you have to have to join is an email address. We no longer rely just on Facebook. We have our own private platform. So these men can join. And when they join, they can actually register to receive a chemo care backpack. It's a backpack filled with essentials for when they're going through treatment, no matter what type of treatment that can be. It could be chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy, any type of treatment they may be going through. We also have an annual men's retreat having in September in Pennsylvania called the Gathering of Wolves. We have, if you notice, our logo has a wolf on it. So we have that kind of wolf pack mentality of taking care of each other like a wolf, like wolves take care of a pack. We kind of have that mentality, that idea. Um, That retreat will be in the Poconos Mountains in Pennsylvania, September 11th through the 14th. This is a free retreat. We just they will be in cabins, so all food and lodging is covered. We'll do multiple breakout sessions. There's free activities. We've got like axe throwing, ice carving, a meditation. There's zip lining. There's a heated pool at the location. There's several other recreational activities that the men can get involved with. And this is a 4-day retreat. And then also we have, I mentioned that we have 40 chapter groups throughout really throughout globally now. We actually have a group in the UK, New Zealand, Australia. We have 5 or 6 groups in Canada. So we have, we're all globally now. So we've impacted probably, my guess would be almost 5,000 men over the last 5 years. So we've definitely been more of a grassroots organization, but growing very, very quickly. We just hired our first executive director to come on board. So we've definitely grown in a powerful way over the last couple of years. But it really came out of me really wanting to turn what was a painful experience into a passionate direction, and really helping men really connect and support one another in this battle with cancer. Like I just know what I went through, what Trevor went through. He went through a very similar battle with depression. So that really is what spurred us on to create Man Up to Cancer. So it's been, and that's really been what has been my focus since surviving cancer in my survivorship. And it's been very helpful because a lot of people assume that when you're done with treatment, you're kind of done with cancer, and they don't realize that it's much more than that. You still have 5 years of scans. You still have 5 years of seeing your oncologist. You still have there's all of these things, and a lot of my friends would be like, "Well, aren't you over that? Aren't you? Why are you still talking about it? Aren't you done? Did you survive it?" And they don't realize what survivorship truly means. So to have a space to talk about that, especially for men, I think is very important. And conversations that men have in these conversations, I mean, there are conversations that they don't feel comfortable maybe talking in a co-ed group, especially when it comes to sexual dysfunction, things like erectile dysfunction and different conversations, and even some of the emotional talk conversations, and even conversations of what they're going through with talking to their children and having those conversations. Like we've had men come to Zoom meetings just talking about relationship issues that they wouldn't have talked about their spouse with until they had a private group that they could actually talk to. And that's another thing we do also is we do bi-monthly Zoom meetings within our group for the men. So we sometimes will have about up to 40 men in a Zoom meeting having these open conversations of what they're going through as well. So once they join the platform, they can have access to those Zoom meetings. So, but that's pretty much my journey. It's something that I'm very proud about, and feel very lucky to be able to share with you. And I hope like I said, I can answer any questions you may have or thoughts that you may have during this time. I'd be happy to do that.
First of all, bravo. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, not only your personal journey, but how that journey of you and of others, led to the formation of Man Up to Cancer. I want to invite everyone on the Zoom call. Feel free to put a question in the chat, speak a question out loud, raise your hand. One thing that I just wanted to ask about was, I think you touched on specific topics, that might be best discussed in a group that's all men. But I kind of wanted to ask about even just the idea of being a patient with cancer, and just like needing support. I work a lot in like support group spaces, and I tend to see that not always, but many times, like more than half of a group in a support group is women. So do you think that speaks to the fact that maybe some men feel like these spaces are not for them, or feel like it's not okay to be the patient. I just wonder if you could speak a little to that and what you've seen
Yeah.
about how people adjust to that.
Well, it's funny. I kind of laugh a little bit, but so when I went to my first support group, I remember going, and I will say this to that the location of the support group was next door to the hospice center where my dad was. He spent his last days, so it was really hard to go to that support group just in that fact alone. But I went because my therapist encouraged me to go, and I remember getting through it that night, and I was really wanting to leave. And this one woman, who became a good friend of mine, was standing at the door, and she had had a stage 4 colorectal. She passed away about 2 years ago, and I remember she kind of grabbed my arm and she said, "I heard your story. I want I want to help you find your peers. I want to help you find the people that are going to help you." So she kind of sat me down, wouldn't let me leave, sat me down, and kind of went over all the organizations I probably should reach out to and talk with. Um, and it was very helpful, and it really kind of helped guide me because a lot of these resources I probably wouldn't have known. I mean, the oncology nurses were great. I mean, they did tell me about the support group, got me to the support group. But a lot of these organizations I didn't know about until this. Her name was Erin Duffy Wood, and she actually sat down with me and said, "This is where you need to go. This is who you should talk with." Which really led me to getting a lot of support I got early on. Another funny thing would be, so it would be me and like you're saying, it would be like me and like two other men and like 9 women in the group. And I remember there's this one guy that would always come to support group, and he would have like this notebook that would have like 10 questions on it that he wanted answered. And the guy on the other, we always had to go, the guy on the other side of me was like, "Thank God he's got questions. That means she won't talk to us." It was just like, we were just, it was funny at the time. But my therapist was really great. She led the conversation. She didn't let us get out of the room without sharing something. She was that kind of direct with us, which was really helpful. She would be like, she gave everybody, their 5 minutes of time at least. Um, but and another thing about this particular support group is that during that period, not only were they meeting with the patients, but they were also meeting with the caregivers. So the patients were in one room and the caregivers were in the other. And this one guy and I would just automatically say to each other, "Are you here because your wife?" And I was like, "Yeah, if I didn't come, I'd be in trouble," kind of thing. So there's always sort of this mix of things happening with men, I think, in these support groups and while they're there. But luckily, the one support group I was in, she was really good about engaging with the patients and made sure we all got a chance to speak. So yeah, I think there's different angles at why men go to these support groups, but I just think sometimes it's just good that they're in the room, and if you can just get them in the room, that's very important. It's very important. And I actually lead a men's cancer support group now at my cancer center once a month, and so I definitely understand. We have a small group. I think we started about a year ago, and I only got like one or two to come, and we broadened it out. I think we have about 11 or 12 that kind of come every month looking for support. So it just takes a while to develop, and so I've been working with the oncology social worker there at the cancer center, and we've just kind of been putting out the word wherever we can to encourage men to come to come to that men's support group every month.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that it can be hard, right, to get
Yeah.
people, any people to come to support groups. You're right.
Yeah.
It takes time to get people to be willing to engage, but I think that's really important that you have that specific
Yeah.
space for men with cancer.
Yeah.
I'm looking in the chat. A couple comments. Jean said, my son went through treatment for testicular cancer 3 years ago. He's now 31, and I wish I could help him open up more. And then Gregory shared or asked, can you share if there are any resources or presentations that we can utilize for community education, sharing the importance of early detection through cancer screening? So do you have any recommendations I mean, I feel like we could find something, but maybe specifically for colorectal cancer. Like, I know that's a cancer that we can
Yeah.
screen for?
Yes. Yes. I know there's a few things. So first with the lady with testicular cancer, it's tough with young men. It is, we do have an AYA chat within our new platform that has about 50 young men that are talking in the chat. A lot of testicular cancer patients. And it's just hard to get them to open up. They're at a time in their lives where they were not expecting to get cancer, right? They were going to college, getting married, doing all these things, and then they get hit with cancer. And they still need to do all these things. And so they're still trying to make all this happen. So they won't even stop to get support in a lot of ways. They'll get through the treatment and they'll move on, hopefully. So yeah, I understand. It's hard to get these guys to share. And one thing about our chemo care backpacks, we at least send the information. I have a whole resource pack that goes out with those backpacks, so at least I can give them. Hopefully, they'll open the backpack, use the things in it, and maybe open that resource pack and see those things. For the younger organizations, there are several organizations. One called Stupid Cancer that's really great for the younger adults. There's also Elephants and Tea is another one that's a great resource for younger adults to join it with any cancer. The colon for colon cancer, uh, Fight Colorectal Cancer has what they call the Colon Club, which is for those under the age of 39 that have been diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Fight Colorectal Cancer is a great resource in general, but that's specifically to younger adults who may have cancer. Colorectal cancer is really great. Um, Another organization, the Colon Cancer Coalition, is a great resource if you're looking if you can't get screenings for some reason, whether it's financial, age, they will actually help you get that screening done through their programming. So those are a couple. I know in general, like if you come to our platform, that's something we're working on. Now that we have our new platform, we are working more on our programming to offer to men, and that's something over the next few months we'll be working on. We're very much a grassroots organization, but we do have a lot of ties in the cancer community that we're building on as well. Um, definitely.
So thank you for that. I'm putting some links in the chat, some of the resources you mentioned and some other ones as well. We have a question.
I actually see another comment. Were you gonna say that?
Yes. I was gonna say that Tara asked, do you think that the new platform you're using over, or instead of Facebook allows for more anonymity that might be more of interest to newly diagnosed men? I think you spoke about this to me and Candace before we officially got started, but was that part of the
Yes.
rationale?
That was part of the rationale because we found I would get emails like 2 or 3 times a week from me, do you have a platform that's not on Facebook? I don't want to be on social media. So that really spurred us on. We had to get grants and fundraise, we had to get, it costs money to actually do our own platform. And so we had to raise funds to do it. And we finally were able to do that this past year. But yeah, and I've seen, like I say, probably of those 800, we've had 800 men join the new platform since May 1st. And I will say probably about 40% of those men were never in the Facebook group. So that says a lot right there, that there's definitely a need that some men just don't want their stuff on social media. There's private reasons for it. I've known men who are afraid of losing their jobs. They don't want like family members to know they have cancer. Culturally, that's something that a lot of cultures don't want, that they're looked ashamed upon, they're looked down upon because they have cancer. So there is definitely a need to find that even more private space, even more private space. And I will say that like our public facing Man to Cancer will stay on Facebook. So we will still have we're probably going to shut down the Facebook group itself probably later this year. Because it's hard to run two platforms like that. Um, we just don't have the capacity to do it. And also our public facing Man After Cancer will still be there to direct people to the new platform.
One other question I had is, one is like, as far as the local chapters, the online resource, the retreat, what, if anything, is the eligibility? Like, is it open to people who are in survivorship of cancer? Is it open to people who have just been ever diagnosed with cancer? Like, kind of talk
If
about that continuum.
if you've ever heard the word cancer as a man at any point in your journey, and if you're a man who is a caregiver as well, not just a patient, if you are a man who is caring for someone with cancer, you're also welcome to be in our community and be active in any of our programming, as well, as well. We have a very small group of caregivers, but we do have some in our group that are caregivers as well. But yeah, once they join the platform at any stage in their cancer, they can be involved with the chapter groups, attend the GOW. I mean, I'm a 7-year survivor, and I would still go to the retreats, and I'm still active, and I have partially I have a North Carolina chapter group that I help lead. But all of this is being done with men who are volunteers as well. These are all male cancer patients who are volunteering to do this work. It's just that's something that sets us apart and makes us very unique, is that a majority, I will say 98% of our work is done by male cancer patients who are, and many of them still battling cancer as well, including our own founder, Trevor Maxwell, as I had mentioned earlier.
That's really amazing, and that's really great to know, that it's such a inclusive group. And as you've mentioned, as I would assume, I think that there's probably a lot of benefit in
Yes.
sharing those experiences of different people at different stages in the journey.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and we have I mean, not large, but we do have a community of gay and trans men in our community as well, who are accepted. We work with another organization called Cheeky Charity, which is an anal cancer community, and we partner with them as well. When they give out resources to the gay and trans community when it comes to anal cancer and colon cancer.
That is also really great to learn. I also see a question in the chat. It says you mentioned a few cancers, but I didn't hear breast cancer. Is there more of a
Yeah.
stigma with male breast cancer, or just a lower incidence rate?
Well, funny you say that. I just returned. Danny is talking. um, mm, ooh. So one of our board members passed away. He was on the board, sorry. One of our leadership members passed away. It was a gentleman named Danny Riggs, who was from Texas. He was part of our Texas chapter group. And he passed away. Oh, um, last month from stage 4 male breast cancer. And so yes, we have a small percentage of men in our organization who are battling male breast cancer. Who are a part of our organization. I just went to his celebration of life last month and miss him dearly. He was really one of my best friends in the organization. And he and I reached out to several men who were battling male breast cancer and are well connected. There's an organization called the CARE Project that we partner with, that work with men who have male breast cancer, helping with financial needs. And we do work with a couple of other breast cancer organizations as well to help men get those resources. But yes, it's definitely, Danny talks about the first time he went to get his mammogram. They assumed that he was there. He was with his wife, so they were assumed that he had gone up to the desk to check on his appointment, and the person was like, "Well, we'll get to your wife in a minute." And he was like, "I'm not here for my wife." And the person's face just dropped. He said that he was actually there to get his mammogram. And he joked, that's just Danny. He joked, he said, "Well, will you give me a 2-for-1? My wife will get hers done too while we're here." So that's just Danny and his humor. He just lived a life, just humor through the whole thing. through the whole thing. So yes, so to answer your question, yes, we do have men in our community that have male breast cancer. Small percentage.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm really glad that that question was asked, because I do think that, there's definitely, like, you hear breast cancer and you think of a certain patient population,
Yep.
usually women, but it
Yep.
affects, people of all genders. And I can't imagine how awkward or invalidating
Yeah.
that type of experience would be for someone that's already, dealing with a lot. So I want to
Yes.
just thank you once again, Joe, for being here and sharing your story. If you have any resources or like links of some of the
Okay.
organizations that you mentioned, feel
Okay.
free to email those to me, and I'm going to
I
be
will.
sending like a group email out with the recording. I can definitely
Okay.
include that.
Okay. That sounds wonderful. We'll do. We'll do. And thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you all today.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. We're glad you spent some time of your day with us. I just want to plug really quickly, our August session is going to be Monday, August 18th, 12 to 1:30 p.m. Central Time. So feel free to convert that into whatever time zone you are in. And that will be a presentation about community-based research called Research Includes Me. So don't miss it. We look forward to seeing you then. And thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.